World War I, 1914 to 1918. World War I is often called the Great War, the first modern war, or the war to end all wars. It was the first war in which modern machine guns, chemical weapons, tanks, fighter aircraft and submarines were used to cause devastation on a global scale. Regardless of what it is called, the events of World War I destroyed entire cities and towns, and took the lives of millions of soldiers and civilians. At the end of World War I, the map of Europe was redrawn. Once powerful empires were broken up and new nations were created in their place. The war also tested Australia's commitment to Great Britain. Although Australia displayed a strong sense of loyalty to Britain by committing troops and resources, the Australian public was divided over the issue of conscription. Today, the sacrifice of those who fought and died in World War I is commemorated in many nations around the world, including Australia, Europe during World War I. Source 1. Trench warfare was a major part of the fighting that took place. Across this photograph shows the remains of a fallen soldier photographed in the trenches during World War. Illustrate it the horror of daily life in the trenches for soldiers on both sides. 9 billions. How and where was World War I fought? What impact did World War I have on Australia? How is World War I remembered and commemorated? 1. There were a number of short-term and long-term factors that led to the outbreak of World War I. Make some predictions about what some of these might have been. 1. During World War I, there were major developments in warfare and weaponry. Much of this new technology was blamed for extending the war. Why do you think this might have been? 1. World War I had a significant impact on people at home in Australia, especially for women and people of German background. Explain why and how the war might have affected these two groups of people in particular. 1. It has been argued that wars are essential to a nation's development and sense of national identity. Do you believe this is true? Discuss your ideas as a class, making reference to the way in which World War I is commemorated each year. Germanin a railwayn carija, Frenchen the forest Frencho. Compiègne 11 November 1918 between armistice. Of armistice the signing the between allies ante. Check your learning. 9.1. 1. When did Britain declare war on Germany? 2. When did the USA enter the war? 3. On what day did World War I end? Source 1. A timeline of key events leading up to, during and immediately after World War I. 9.2. Background to World War I. For example, the rate of economic progress and improvements in the standard of living was unevenly spread across Europe. The Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries led to many advances in Britain and Germany, but had little impact on the nations of Eastern Europe, such as Austria-Hungary, the Balkan states and Russia. This contributed further to the rivalry between nations. Even in industrialized nations like Britain and Germany, there was a huge gap between rich and poor. Many working-class families lived in cramped, unsanitary conditions or in urban slums. Women were still not allowed to vote in Europe, and new political movements divided people along class and ethnic lines. Many governments and people were afraid of the rising influence of radical political movements like socialism and anarchism. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 was the result of a complex interaction of tensions that had been building between countries in Europe for more than 20 years. National rivalries, jealousies over territory, competition over economic progress, competition over the size of armies and navies, and the race to colonize new parts of the world all contributed to the tension. So although Europe seemed to be peaceful before World War I, these rivalries and tensions bubbled away beneath the surface. The last major war in Europe, the Franco-Prussian War, was fought between France and a number of independent German kingdoms. The war ended in 1871, when the French were defeated. As a result of their victory, the German states unified to form the German Empire Germany. After unification, Germany attempted to limit France's power and secure its place in European politics by developing a system of alliances with other countries across. Source 1: An English recruitment poster from World War I. In the lead-up to World War I, it seemed unlikely that close relations would become involved in armed conflict, let alone fight on opposing sides. Europe. This system changed the way in which many European countries interacted with each other, and resulted in the development of two major alliances. All of the most powerful European countries belong to one or the other of these alliances. These countries believed that their alliances would act as a deterrent to war, because if a member of one alliance was attacked by a member of the other alliance, all the members of both alliances would have to become involved. This became known as balance of power politics. Europe seemed prosperous during this time. The Industrial Revolution had transformed Western Europe with new production methods and advances in technology affecting almost every sector of society. Governments had made improvements in healthcare, sanitation and assistance for the poor. Roads, canals, and railways were making trade and transport cheaper and more accessible. Literacy levels were also rising. On the whole, members of the middle classes across Europe had fought for greater political rights and now enjoyed a higher standard of living. The working classes had also won some basic rights, such as the right to vote in Britain after 1867. Source 2: Queen Victoria, seated front center, photographed with members of her extended family in 1894. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany is seated front left. Check your learning 9.2. Source 3: Tsar Nicholas II of Russia left with his cousin, King George V of England, right. Their mothers were sisters. Europe in the lead-up to war. Remember and understand. Apply and analyze. In 1901, the situation in Europe appeared peaceful. Queen Victoria had occupied the British throne for over 60 years, and many of her relations and descendants had married into royal houses all over Europe. See Source 2. As a result, many of the royal families of Europe were closely related. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, and King George V were all first cousins. See Source 3. The wife of Tsar Nicholas II was also one of Queen Victoria's granddaughters. However, this prosperity masked both international and domestic tensions. Despite their close family ties and relationships, there were jealousies among many of the royal families in Europe. Issues such as the different rates of economic progress, the size of colonial empires, and the development of weapons, armies, and ships all caused rivalry between major European nations. Which country was responsible for developing a system of alliances in the 1870s? 2. Why did European countries at the time believe that these alliances would help to prevent war? 3. Explain how it was that so many of Europe's royal families were related. 4. How would you summarize the social and political situation in Europe around 1900? Explain your answer. Evaluate and create. 5. Conduct some research into the meanings of socialism and anarchism. Why do you think governments in the early 1900s would have been afraid of the growing influence of these movements? There were 4 main factors that contributed to the growing tension between European countries in the lead-up to World War I, including the alliance system, nationalism, imperialism, Hic militarism, the alliance system. One of the key factors that led to the outbreak of World War I was the alliance system. From the 1870s onwards, Europe's leading nations grouped themselves into two alliances. Over time, these alliances became more formal and legally binding. In 1882, the Triple Alliance was formed between the countries of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. In 1907, the Triple Entente was formed between the countries of Britain, France, and Russia. See Source 2. Entente is a French word meaning an understanding or alliance. By joining one of these alliances, each participating nation promised to provide military support if one of its members was attacked by a member of the opposing alliance. Ironically, one of the main goals of the alliance system was actually to prevent the outbreak of war. It was assumed that no single country would go to war against another if there was a risk that a small conflict between two nations could easily build into a large conflict between many countries. Unfortunately, the alliance system had the opposite effect. See Source 3. And over time, these alliances increased the tension between Triple Alliance and Triple Entente countries. In addition to the key countries shown in Source 1, many other countries, colonies, and territories around the world were drawn into the alliance system. See Source: Oxford University Press. Source 2. For example, all British colonies, such as India, and dominions such as Australia and New Zealand, automatically became part of the Triple Entente. Japan had signed a treaty with Britain in 1902 that also meant that they could all be drawn into war if a conflict broke out in Europe. Bosnia-Herzegovina was also considered a member of the Triple Entente because Russia was a key supporter of Bosnia-Herzegovina's bid for independence from Austria-Hungary. A conflict between Bosnia-Herzegovina and Austria-Hungary would therefore become a conflict between all the countries that were members of the two alliances. Nationalism. Nationalism was another important factor that contributed to the outbreak of war in 19. Put simply, nationalism is a sense of pride in and a love of one's nation. Nationalism grows out of an understanding of common goals and beliefs between the people of a nation, for example, a shared language, culture, and history. In Europe, nationalism played an important role in the lead-up to World War I. Nationalism can either unite or divide the people of a nation or region. For example, feelings of nationalism contributed to the unification of many small German kingdom states to form the German Empire, Germany in 1871. A sense of nationalism also encouraged cooperation between Germany and Austria. Source 3. This cartoon illustrates how World War I escalated as a result of the alliance system. Hungary, because German language speakers ruled both empires. However, Austria-Hungary was not only made up of people who thought of themselves as Germans and spoke the German language, it was also made up of many other ethnic and language groups, such as Hungarians, Serbians, and Bosnians. From around 1900 onwards, a number of ethnic groups began fighting for independence from Austria-Hungary. One region attempting to assert its independence was Bosnia-Herzegovina, an area in southeastern Europe known as the Balkans. See Source 15.14. In the years before World War I, Bosnia-Herzegovina was under the control of Austria-Hungary. However, Bosnia-Herzegovina was made up of many different ethnic groups, including Bosnians, Serbs, and Croats, who did not see themselves as historically, ethnically, or culturally linked to either Austria or Hungary. Instead, most of the people of Bosnia-Herzegovina wanted to join with Serbia to form their own nation. Russia had been supporting moves by Bosnia-Herzegovina to become independent and unite with Serbia, So when a Serbian youth was accused of assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in 1914, Russia was drawn into the conflict that followed. Imperialism. Another factor that led to tensions between European countries in the lead-up to World War I was imperialism. Imperialism is a policy by which a country increases its power by gaining control over new